I only picked up Elaine's phone to call the plumber. Then I saw my name sitting in a text thread like a price tag. The thread was titled, Jason Project. Neat and bland, the way you label a box before you move it out of a house. The latest bubble said, Marty won't notice if we do it after his pension hits. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Sunday, November 17, 2024. Rain tapping our porch roof in Greenfield, Pittsburgh. The water heater was moaning like it missed the old mill where I used to work. I thumbed the screen to tap the plumber's number, and my eyes, all on their own, slid down the conversation. Jason, my son-in-law, wrote at 11:43 a.m., appraisal guy said mid-December. If we clear the old man by Christmas, we can list January. The words felt like an ice cube pushed down my spine. Not one kiss face emoji, not one flirty line. It was cleaner than cheating. It was planning. The oven timer shrieked from the kitchen, that thin metallic scream that always reminds me of the plant's alarm. Elaine called, "Did you get through?" I answered, on hold, and kept reading. She had sent him a photo, our file box cracked open, the deeds corner peeking, my signature slanted and younger than I remember being. Beneath the phone, in real life on our counter, lay a crumpled invoice for $2,800. Consulting, grease from breakfast, making a dark thumbprint on the 9. I smoothed it with the flat of my hand and saw our address spelled right, our zip code honest as a bruise. I put the phone face down and listened to my heart work. If they were going to test me, they'd do it on the 20th when my pension lands, $3,412, like a clock that never lies. I learned at the mill that men don't usually steal with a crowbar. They steal with a clipboard. They say routine. They say liquidity. They say just sign here so we can move fast. At lunch, Elaine set soup in front of me and watched my eyes instead of my mouth. "Plumber coming?" she asked. "He'll call back," I said, and she tilted her head, the way a hawk reads wind. Her phone lay at the edge of the table like a small, sleeping witness. I wanted to grab it and shout. Instead, I let the spoon clink the bowl and counted. If you want to keep a house, you count. After she left for a quick drive, I stepped into the garage and opened the file box. My name on the deed. A mortgage stamped satisfied 12 years ago. I slid the deed into a plastic sleeve and slipped the $2,800 invoice behind it, like you'd tuck a warning note in your wallet. I took out my flip phone, stubborn old thing that won't betray me with previews, and set a reminder for November 20th. Watch deposit. Watch withdrawals. At dusk, the streetlight cast a pale ladder across our bedroom wall. Elaine brushed her teeth, humming a cheerful nothing. I lay there and pictured my life translated into somebody else's columns. Assets, liabilities, equity to be unlocked with a Florida brochure smile. The oven timer earlier kept ringing in my head. Not a siren, just a persistent suggestion that something's done. I whispered to the ceiling, proof, not panic. It felt like a prayer, a foreman would say. I reached into my robe pocket, felt the crumple of that $2,800, and understood the shape of my next days. Names, dates, amounts, and a boundary drawn straight as a chalk line on new concrete. Tomorrow, I'd confirm the money trail. Then I'd find out who thought I was too tired to follow it. Monday, November 18th, 2024. The kind of Pittsburgh gray that makes noon look like early morning. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug that had gone cold enough to hold like an ice pack. The wood was nicked in the same place where, 17 years ago, I dropped a wrench and promised Elaine I'd fix the gouge. I never did. Funny what you fix and what you live with. At 9:12 a.m., Elaine's iPhone chirped on the counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. The preview banner slid down just far enough to tell me everything and nothing. Reminder. Appraisal follow-up Friday. Friday. I let my eyes close, counted to 5 the way I used to before pulling a stuck bolt. Slow, deliberate, pretend you're stronger than the metal. A water ring ghosted under my mug. I moved it a fraction, lining the circle up with the gouge. If you squinted, it looked like a target. I did the math the old-fashioned way. Pen, yellow pad, big numbers that don't hide. Pension, 34/12 due Wednesday. Checking, comfortable, not flashy. Savings, enough to sleep at night. House paid off, equity like a second spine holding me upright. $412,000 by last year's estimate. Not that I ever planned to cash it out. The house wasn't a number. It was a flavor. Roast at Christmas, wet wool drying by the register. Machine oil from my coat in winter. The 2,800 consulting invoice lay to my right. Smoothed, flat, grease thumbprint dark as a bruise. I wrote Y at the top. Under it, I listed guesses like a cop who knows the suspect but needs a confession. Pre-appraisal. Contractor deposit? Jason's home flip? In the margin, I wrote, "My signature is not a rubber stamp." Saying it out loud made the room steadier. The refrigerator hummed. The baseboard heater clicked and then sighed. I stood because sitting felt like sinking. Outside, the maple in Mrs. Patel's yard had shaken off most of its leaves. A wet carpet of rust and brown. I walked the sidewalk slow enough to look like a man admiring winter, fast enough to keep from being stopped by my own thoughts. Mrs. Patel raised a mittened hand. "Morning, Mr. Keene." She looked past me at our house. "You two selling before the snow?" The word selling landed in my knees like a sack of ballast. My tongue misfired. "Just tidying up," I said, and lifted my hand in a way that could mean anything. She nodded and told me to watch the black ice near the curb. I walked on, counting each step until my lungs found a rhythm and my jaw unclenched. The garage smelled like 10 winters of effort, salt, rubber, the faint metallic dust that never really leaves a man. I flipped on the single bulb, and it stuttered to life. My socket wrench lay on the pegboard hook where it belonged, thick-handled and nicked, same tool I'd used during that '09 blackout, to keep a line moving so a few hundred paychecks didn't bounce. I took it off the hook and turned it in my hands. Wait, that makes sense. I pressed the cool metal against my palm until the ache in my chest changed shape, until it was a thing I could name: fear. I'd worked with men who gambled away marriages and with men who drank away houses. I had been neither, which means I had run out of excuses for losing anything. The file box sat on the workbench, its lid half open like a mouth reluctant to speak. I checked the deed again, then slipped the $2,800 behind it, as if tucking a note into a hymn book. The invoice made a dry whisper against the plastic sleeve. "I hear you," I said. "I hear you, and I'll answer with paper." At 2:05 p.m., my flip phone vibrated with the kind of timid insistence it reserves for family. Nora, my daughter's voice has the weight of every Christmas morning and every scraped knee I ever patched. "Dad, are you and Mom doing Thanksgiving at ours?" Her voice cracked in the middle, a hairline line between two truths. "We'll be there," I said. Then, as casually as I could, "How's Jason's business?" I could hear a drawer slide in her kitchen, the modest rasp of wood on wood. "He's got a big flip lined up, Dad. Needs liquidity." It's a lot of moving pieces, liquidity. The word is honest in a physics class and slippery in a living room. My stomach turned and then settled somewhere lower than I prefer. "Moving pieces break if you push too fast," I said, and she gave a soft, non-committal We confirmed side dishes and time, and then she asked too brightly, "Mom, okay?" I told her yes, because telling her no would be an invitation to cry, and I needed her eyes dry for when truth finally showed up. When the call ended, I sat on the garage step and let the quiet make its case. I thought about the cigar box in the hall closet where I'd tucked pay stubs from my 20s, where sweat and metal and pride are all the same color. Every swing of a hammer, every overnight shift, bought a rafter, a furnace repair, a little bit of stillness after supper. If you want to know a man's religion, watch what he builds and what he refuses to sell. Elaine came home around 4. Her keys made a cheerful jingle that hit me like a cough. She stepped into the kitchen with grocery bags and the smell of rosemary. "They had a special on standing rib," she said, like we were auditioning for a holiday commercial. "Christmas Eve?" She watched my face. "That sounds nice," I said, because I needed Christmas Eve, needed the table set, needed witnesses who loved the truth more than tradition. She smiled with all the sincerity of a good liar or a woman halfway convinced by her own story. I couldn't tell which yet. She set a glossy flyer on the fridge, Free home valuation beat winter listings. Pitch perfect. She pinned it with a magnet shaped like a cardinal. Dinner was soup again, and the oven timer's ring was just long enough to make my teeth itch. Halfway through, my mind slid back to the preview on her phone. Appraisal Friday. My chest tightened, then loosened with a plan that felt like breathing. Wednesday, pension lands. Thursday, if any hands but mine touch it, I'll know. Tuesday, I need allies. Banking first. The kid I coached on budgets back when he was a teller, Ben Ortiz, he's a branch manager now. He owes me a kindness, but I won't need the debt. I'll need his signature, and I'll need a lawyer who knows the difference between revenge and remedy. After dishes, Elaine stood at the sink and stared into the window as if it were a painting. The cardinal magnet caught the light and threw a red blink across her cheek. "Nora called?" she asked, not turning. "She did," I said. "Turkey at 2. "Good," she said, and ran water until steam made a ghost on the glass. We are all good at pretending when the script is short. I lay in bed and listened to our house breathe, the furnace taking a slow lungful, the refrigerator clearing its throat, the faint tick that means the thermostat will keep its promise. My body felt like a lock that needed oil. In the dark, I slid my hand into my robe pocket and pressed that $2,800 crumple against my thigh like a talisman. Proof, not panic. Names, not noise. I pictured the week like a job board. Tuesday, bank. Tuesday afternoon, law. Late week, if they bring an appraiser to my door. He'll meet paperwork thicker than his clipboard. I stared at the ceiling until the streetlight made its familiar ladder across it. Pale rungs I've been climbing for 38 years of marriage. I didn't cry. I'm not built that way. I counted bolts. I breathed like a man in a welding mask, slow, careful, aware of sparks. And in that cautious rhythm, I said one thing out loud into the darkness. Pressed flat as a blueprint. Tomorrow I stop feeling, and I start filing. Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. First frost. The kind that makes the world look like it's been dusted with flour and quiets the neighborhood dogs. I left the car keys on the hook and took the bus to Squirrel Hill instead. Elaine thought I was heading to the hardware store for pipe sealant. I didn't correct her. It was easier to let her think I was still fixing things, not realizing I was already rebuilding something much bigger. My life. The 61C bus hissed to a stop outside the PNC branch where Ben Ortiz worked. He used to be a teller I trained 20 years ago when he was fresh out of high school, shaky with numbers but honest with heart. I told him once that a man who balances other people's books learns how to protect his own. I wasn't wrong. "Mr. Keene," he said when he saw me at the counter. "You don't usually come in person," I smiled thinly. "You still keep paper files for people you like?" He chuckled, but the smile faded when he saw the look on my face. In his office, behind the frosted glass, I laid out the evidence like a mechanic showing a bent axle, phone photos of the texts, the $2,800 consulting bill, the pension timing note I'd scribbled. Ben leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You're saying these transactions aren't yours?" "2 ATM withdrawals," I said, tapping the printout. "One 200 last Thursday, 800 Saturday. I don't pull cash that way. I sign, I swipe, I don't sneak," he swallowed. "They were authorized using your PIN." I met his eyes. "If a card was cloned or a number shared, freeze it. Anything new that isn't in my handwriting, you stop. And if anyone tries to change contact numbers, you call me first." He nodded, jaw set, and printed a memo with his signature. "I'll back this up with an affidavit if needed," he said. There was gratitude behind his professionalism. Maybe he remembered the time I helped him fix his first tax return. Or maybe he just recognized a man standing on the edge of something rotten. At 2 p.m., I walked 2 blocks to attorney Lila Green's office. The sign on her glass door said Elder Law and Estates, gold leaf peeling at the corner. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and copy toner. She looked young enough to still believe paperwork could save the world. That gave me hope. "Tell me everything," she said, pen poised. I started with the texts, the invoice, the withdrawals, the appraiser reminder. I told her about Elaine's sudden interest in downsizing and Jason's liquidity talk. When I finished, she didn't look shocked, just disappointed. The kind of look a teacher gives when she realizes a test was rigged. "We move methodically," she said. "Power of attorney still joint?" "Yes, house is paid off in both our names." "Good," she said. "We can file a notice that no sale or lien can happen without your notarized consent. I'll also recommend a precautionary trust. Keeps the property safe until this is resolved." She scribbled on a yellow pad, the pen moving faster as she spoke. "Photograph your documents. Print your statements. Ask your bank for record copies of any attempted transfers or number changes. And Mr. Keene, don't confront them yet." I nodded. "I'm a foreman, not a fighter." Her smile was brief. "Same thing sometimes." By 4:40 p.m., I'd walked 2 blocks to meet a private investigator named Gerard Pike. He was a thick man with a soft voice and a trench coat that had seen rain and regret. "1 week's retainer covers 2 visits and a report," he said, sliding a form across a diner table. I handed him 400 cash. "Confirm any meetings between my wife and my son-in-law," I said. "And if an appraiser or contractor visits my address, I want a timestamp and a plate number." He nodded, not curious, just efficient. "You'll have it," he said, folding the receipt neatly. "Proof, not panic. Always paper." That night I stood in the hallway replacing the smoke detector battery. It chirped one last time before falling silent. That sound, the click of fresh control, felt like breathing again. Elaine peeked out from the bedroom door. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just fixing what's been ignored too long," I said. She smiled faintly, unaware of the double meaning. When she went back inside, I took my notebook from the counter and started a ledger like the ones we used at the mill. I labeled it The House and dated it at the top. Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, bank. Withdrawals confirmed and reversed pending affidavit. Law, consent order filing by L. Green. P.I. 1 week surveillance. Retainer paid cash. Next, photograph file box and deed. Print phone screenshots. Repair timeline. The next page I titled Locks. Beside it I wrote, "Change Schlager cylinder December 2nd. Then underlined it twice. I turned off the light and stood in the dark doorway of our bedroom. Elaine was asleep already, breathing shallow, one hand on the empty half of the bed. I whispered the words that had guided me through 1,000 inspections. Measure twice. Cut once. Tomorrow I'd bait the trap. A gentle, harmless question about holiday plans. But tonight, I'd let the frost stay on the windows. Cold keeps things honest. Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. Pension deposit day. The morning air bit like a warning, crisp and metallic. I brewed coffee slow, counting seconds as if the percolator could pace my heartbeat. Elaine left early for her hair appointment, her tone too light, her perfume too strong, both signs she was dressing her conscience. At 9:01 a.m., I checked my account on the old desktop in my study. The pension deposit had landed, 3,512 exactly. My hands hovered over the keyboard, waiting. At 9:18 a.m., a notification blinked red. A pending transfer for $600, labeled household cash. Ben called at 9:21 on the dot. "You didn't authorize this, right?" I didn't even need to breathe before answering. "No, I've reversed it and flagged the account," he said, voice tight. "You're covered, Marty. I'll draft a memo and sign it." That memo, his ink. His signature became my first shield. I drove to Office Max next, the same store where we used to buy school supplies for Nora. I picked out a small fireproof box, $59.99. Inside it I placed folders labeled by hand: bank, deposits, attempts, withdrawals, house deed, appraisal, insurance phone, screenshots, texts, legal green Pike. That box wasn't storage. It was armor. Every page I filed in there felt like a breath I didn't owe anyone. At noon, I found Elaine humming in the kitchen, scrolling her phone. "Thinking of doing Christmas Eve at home," I said, stirring sugar I didn't need into my coffee. "Just family, like old times." She smiled too quickly. "Jason mentioned maybe doing a holiday toast with his investor friends. Maybe we could join them. Investor friends, toasts. That's how Betrayal always talks, dressed up as celebration." I nodded. "Sure," I said softly. "Just let me know." At 3:07 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from Gerard Pike. the PI. One photo, Jason's pickup truck, idling in front of my house. Timestamp 3:12 p.m. A man in a grey coat stood at my door, clipboard in hand. Appraisal confirmed, Gerard wrote. Elaine present. Proof, not panic. By the time Elaine came home, the house smelled faintly of her new lavender detergent. She kissed my cheek, quick, practiced, and placed her purse near the file box. Later, when she went upstairs, I opened the garage keypad log on my computer. And there it was. Entry recorded at 5:46 p.m. The code used was ours. No one else had it. My file box lid was ajar by 1/2 inch. I printed the keypad log and slipped it into the house tab. Then I called the Allegheny County Assessor's office. Any appraisals requested for 1423 Beechwood Avenue? I asked. The clerk shuffled papers. Yes, one inquiry scheduled for December 6th from, let's see, Home Flip LLC, Jason's company. The number matched the one from his business card, the one I'd helped him design for free. I circled December 6th in red marker on my wall calendar and stared at it until my coffee went cold. That was their stage date, the day they'd measure my walls, my floors, my worth. That night, while Elaine folded laundry, I rehearsed my next move in silence. My plan was simple. Let them believe I was blind, but let them build their trap on my floorboards. They'd invite the appraiser, maybe a contractor. They'd count square feet, not realizing I was counting signatures. I opened my ledger and wrote under December goals. Gather financial affidavit from Ben. Confirm legal filing with Green. Let them stage the appraisal. Prepare evidence binder for Christmas Eve. When Elaine climbed into bed, she asked, "You're quiet tonight." "Just tired," I said. "Long day," she turned over. The lavender smell clung to the sheets, soft and sour at once. At 10:47 p.m., I stepped into the cold garage again. The air bit at my lungs. The fireproof box sat on the workbench like a faithful guard dog. I unlocked it, checked every folder, then whispered, "Stay with me." I slid my pocket recorder beside it, not for spying, but for notes, my own time-stamped alibi, before turning off the light. I jotted one final reminder on a yellow sticky note and stuck it inside the box lid. Control the paper, control the truth. The next morning, I'd test Nora, not her love, but her loyalty, and that would tell me which half of my family was salvageable. Thursday, November 21st, 2024. Pittsburgh woke up in shades of fog and exhaust, the kind of morning that makes every breath feel borrowed. I buttoned my flannel, tucked the fireproof box back under my workbench, and called Nora. "Sweetheart, how about breakfast at Pamela's Diner?" I said, trying to sound like a man who just wanted pancakes. She hesitated. "Is Mom coming?" "Just you and me," I replied. "I'll buy the hotcakes." Pamela's on Murray Avenue still smelled like syrup and second chances. I chose the booth by the window, the one with the cracked red vinyl seat that used to squeak under her when she was 8 and swinging her legs. She arrived looking tired, not from motherhood, but from the kind of marriage that makes you watch your words before you breathe. When the waitress poured our coffee, I slid my phone across the table, open to one screenshot. Jason's text, "If we clear the old man by Christmas." Her hand froze halfway to the mug. "Dad, what is this?" "I was hoping you'd tell me," I said quietly. She read, lips moving, eyes widening. "Jason said—" She stopped. "He said you wanted to downsize." "He said it was your idea." I shook my head once. "No, Nora, he wants liquidity. And he's willing to use your mother to get it." She covered her mouth, eyes glassy. "Dad, I can't choose between you." "You don't have to," I told her, sliding the phone back. "Just don't choose a lie." The waitress refilled our coffee without asking. I left cash on the table, 10 more than the bill, and stood up. "If anything feels off, call me first." "Don't text, call." Nora nodded, tears catching in her lashes. I kissed the top of her head and walked out into the pale November sun, feeling like a man carrying both the truth and a funeral folded in his pocket. Back home, the mailbox was already stuffed. Among the flyers was one that stopped my breath. Glossy paper, red headline, "Free home valuation, beat winter listings." The same pitch the clerk mentioned, now sitting smugly in my hands. Elaine pinned it to the fridge like it was a recipe. "Just ideas," she said with a shrug. "The market's crazy this year." "Crazy," I repeated, forcing a smile. The oven timer dinged, shrill and punctual. It always did that when the silence got too loud. At 8:10 that evening, my email chimed. "Ben Ortiz again. Marty, someone just tried to add a new mobile number to your bank profile. Attempt blocked. Origin traced near Jason's office. We've flagged it internally. I printed it immediately, added it to the bank folder, and drew a thick line under the date. November 21st, 8:10 p.m. Elaine set dinner. Roast chicken, over-seasoned, and asked, "Everything okay at the bank?" "Smooth as ever," I said. Her fork paused mid-air, the faintest tremor running through her wrist before she recovered. "Good. I was thinking maybe we should talk to a financial planner soon. Maybe after the holidays," I said, smiling so she wouldn't hear the storm in my voice. Saturday, November 23rd, 11:14 a.m. Text from Mrs. Patel next door. "Contractor van parked outside your driveway for 10 minutes. No one came to the door. Looked like they were taking pictures. Should I be worried?" "No, just curious," I replied. "Thank you." She sent a blurry photo. A white van, unmarked, the driver's reflection caught faintly in the mirror. I saved it, printed it, labeled it House, Contractors, and added it to the box. That afternoon, I bought a small digital voice memo recorder from Best Buy. $39.99, pocket-sized black plastic. Not to spy, but to record my notes, my times, my truth. I pressed record and spoke. Saturday, November 23rd. 11:14 a.m. Contractor van. Jason likely scouting appraisal angles. Elaine pretending ignorance. All files secure. My voice sounded calm, steady, older than I felt. By evening, the tension in the house had its own weight, a third presence sitting between us at dinner. She scrolled her phone through the meal, and I watched her reflection in the silverware, her mouth tightening, thumb hovering, guilt in motion. The oven timer dinged again, sharp as a judge's gavel. We didn't speak. After she went to bed, I pulled out the wall calendar. December 6th, appraisal. December 24th, holiday dinner. 2 red circles. One for their trap, one for mine. I whispered into the quiet kitchen. Every lie leaves paperwork. Then I made one final note in the ledger, underlined twice in red ink. Proof ready. Dinner cost exposure. Witnesses, Sedun family. When the oven timer went off again, this time just the leftover preheat from her baking, I laughed once. A short breath that felt like steel cooling after fire. December 24th would decide which version of this family survived the winter. Friday, December 6th, 2024. Appraisal day. Frost edged every mailbox on Beechwood Avenue like a white outline around the truth. I parked 2 houses down, engine off, breath fogging the windshield. Gerard Pike sat beside me in his trench coat, camera resting on his lap. He didn't talk much. Men like him never do. They've seen too many endings. At 10:03 a.m., a silver sedan pulled up in front of my house. The appraiser stepped out. Clipboard, measuring tape, and that quick professional glance at the roofline that tells you he's pricing your life. Jason followed in his black pickup, wearing his usual contractor casual, vest over flannel, phone in hand, confidence he hadn't earned. And then came Elaine. She opened the front door with that laugh, the one that used to mean I'm happy, but now sounded like we're getting away with it. Gerard lifted his camera. Click. The shutter sounded like a nail. Being driven home, I didn't go inside. I called Lila Green from the truck. "They're here," I said. "Perfect timing," she replied. "I just filed the notice at the courthouse. Any sale or lien on your property now legally requires your notarized consent." Her voice was steady, calm. "You'll get the stamped copy by mail on the 10th. That's your shield. Keep it close." At 11:27 a.m., Ben texted, attempted $4,200 transfer labeled contractor hold, blocked per freeze. I exhaled so slowly it hurt. My account was safe, my proof stronger. I wasn't angry anymore, just alert. Revenge doesn't burn hot. It measures temperature and weights. That evening when Elaine came home, she was glowing. "Long day," she said, cheeks pink, perfume heavy enough to fill the kitchen. "Jason thinks the house could fetch more than we thought." I stirred my coffee, watching the steam twist between us. Fetch, I repeated. Like a dog, she frowned. What? Nothing, I said and smiled. The kind of smile that comes from knowing more than you say. Later that night, she placed a small envelope beneath the Christmas tree, wrapped in gold ribbon. Early gift, she said softly. Don't peek. She went upstairs to shower. I waited until the pipes started hissing, then crouched by the tree. The card inside read New Beginnings. Inside was a reservation slip for a Florida condo tour, December 29th. 2 names on the printout, Elaine Keene and Jason Holloway. Not a single mention of me. She wasn't running off with him romantically. No, she was running off with our future. Signing me out of my own life, I sat in the dark for a long while, just listening to the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock. Each sound reminded me how every betrayal has rhythm. People think cheating is fast, but it's patient, procedural, bureaucratic. It moves through forms and signatures before it ever shows its face. That night I called Nora. Sweetheart, I said, voice low. Christmas Eve dinner home, just family. No investors, no toast. Her voice trembled. You're planning something. I'm planning the truth, I said. All I need from you is to show up, sit beside your father, and keep your eyes open. Silence, I asked. Yes, she said. People hear truth better when it's not yelling at them. Before bed, I took the fireproof box from the garage and placed it under my bed. My final ledger entry for the night read, appraisal complete. Transfers blocked. Florida trip uncovered. Dinner, Kark exposure point. I looked at Elaine sleeping beside me, her hand resting near the edge of the blanket, gold wedding band catching the moonlight. I remembered how we'd built this house, nail by nail, saving every receipt, every warranty. She once said, a home is only worth what it holds. She was right, she just forgot who it was holding. I whispered into the dark, you built this trap, Elaine. I just tightened the bolts, and then I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the furnace fade into the quiet rhythm of a man waiting for Christmas Eve, the night their play would meet my paperwork. Tuesday, December 24th, 2024, Christmas Eve. The kind of cold that bites your fingertips through gloves. I woke early, brewed coffee, and set the table before sunrise. The china I laid out belonged to my mother, gold-rimmed, cream-colored, the kind you use once a year to remind yourself of decency. I wanted decency tonight. Not rage, not screaming, just truth, porcelain, and silence heavy enough to echo. The roast went into the oven at 3 p.m. sharp. By 4:15, the house smelled like rosemary and history. I set out the 3 documents in my fireproof box. Ben's affidavit, Gerard's photos, and Lila's notice of consent, each in its own clear sleeve. My evidence wasn't dramatic. It was dull, lawful, and absolute. Paper has a funny way of sounding louder than yelling when it's slid across a table. Jason arrived first, punctual as guilt. He came with a bottle of Cabernet and that salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. "Merry Christmas, Dad," he said. I nodded. "Evening, Jason. Hang your coat anywhere but the office." Elaine came next, dressed in festive red, her perfume wafting ahead of her like an apology rehearsed too many times. "Everything smells amazing," she said, setting down a dessert dish. "Smells honest," I replied. "Not everyone can say that." She laughed weakly, pretending not to hear. Nora arrived last, mascara faintly smudged, a detail only a father would notice. Her hug was real, shaky and brief. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded, though her eyes were already watching Jason. We sat. Grace was said, hands touching, words about gratitude hanging in the air like icicles ready to drop. Then the oven timer dinged, that sharp, metallic sound that had become my story's punctuation mark. I stood, pushing back my chair. "Before the roast comes out," I said, "I've got 3 readings." The tone was calm. "Too calm," Elaine blinked, fork midair. "Readings?" I smiled. "You'll see." From my seat I placed the first document in the center of the table, Ben Ortiz's affidavit. "Account freeze notice," I said evenly. "Filed after unauthorized withdrawal attempts. November 20th, 9 a.m., pension day. $600 labeled household cash, blocked. Attempted number change, December 10th, traced to an office suite belonging to Home Flip LLC. Jason's jaw clenched, his wine glass frozen mid-turn. That's absurd, I cut him off with a small gesture. Sliding the next page forward, Gerard Pike's photos. The table lights caught the glossy paper, Jason's pickup in front of my house on December 6th. The appraiser beside him, clipboard raised. Another shot, contractor van idling on the 23rd. A third, Elaine standing at the doorway, laughing, clipboard in hand. I didn't look at the pictures. I watched their faces. Elaine's hand went to her mouth. Jason's throat moved, like he was trying to swallow something sharp. These were taken by a licensed investigator, I said softly. Times, dates, witnesses. The camera doesn't lie, though people do. Nora's voice cracked through the stillness. Mom, Jason, is this true? Jason shifted, voice pitching upward. It's not what it looks like. It's a misunderstanding. We were exploring opportunities, routine appraisal work. Liquidity, that's all. The words clattered uselessly like loose screws on a tile floor. Routine, I repeated. Like the 4,200 contractor hold you tried to push through on December 6th. Blocked, like the Florida condo reservation under your names. Found it under the tree. I reached down and lifted the Tay Gold envelope. Set it on the table. Nice wrapping, Elaine. But you forgot the third ticket, for your husband. Her face went pale, mascara trembling at the edges. Marty, please. I'm not angry, I interrupted. Just aligning numbers with names. The last paper came out. Lila's notice of consent. Stamped and signed. Filed December 10th, I said, my voice low but clear. States that any sale or lien on 1423 Beechwood Avenue requires my notarized signature, meaning every step you've taken, every appraisal, every transfer attempt, is void unless I approve it. I looked around the table. Do I approve it? Silence. The kind that feels like a held breath from the whole house. Nora reached out and placed her hand over mine. Dad, she whispered. You don't have to keep explaining. I believe you. Jason stood abruptly, chair legs scraping. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. We were trying to set things up. Elaine cut him off, voice trembling. Jason, stop. Her fingers twisted in her napkin. He knows. All of it, I nodded once. That's the first honest sentence spoken at this table tonight. Jason's face hardened. You can't prove intent. This'll blow over. Maybe, I said. But Lila Green thinks otherwise. She's already filed an elder financial exploitation notice with supporting evidence. That got him. He froze mid-breath. He knew what that meant. Court orders, investigations, frozen accounts, reputational damage. Investors don't like men under inquiry. I poured myself a glass of wine and took a slow sip. The roast smoked faintly in the oven, but nobody moved. The smell of overdone meat mixed with the sharp tang of truth. Nora broke the silence again. Mom, why? Elaine's eyes filled, her voice small. I just wanted security. Jason said it was temporary. He said you'd never know, Jason muttered. That's not what I held up a hand. You can both stop now. The roast is ruined, but the evening's still useful. I stood and gestured toward the door. If there's more truth out there, fetch it. No one moved. A full minute passed before Jason muttered something about misunderstandings again and grabbed his coat. The bottle of Cabernet clattered against the table as he left. Elaine didn't follow. She sat there, eyes fixed on the papers, breathing in short bursts like someone realizing she'd built her own gallows, one polite errand at a time. When the door closed, I finally pulled the roast from the oven. The oven timer dinged again, soft this time, like a punctuation mark instead of a scream. I set the pan down and said quietly, "Merry Christmas." No one answered. Later that night, after Nora left and the dishes sat cold in the sink, I gathered the documents back into their sleeves. Elaine sat on the couch, staring at the empty tree. She whispered, "You hate me now." I shook my head. "No, hate's quick. I've got slow, steady justice and paper that doesn't forget." Upstairs, I locked the fireproof box, slid it back under the bed, and turned off the light. The oven timer's echo still hung in my ears. That sound, sharp, honest, final, was the cleanest kind of consequence there is. Thursday, December 26, 2024, the day after Christmas. The city was quiet, like it was catching its breath after too many lies told over too many dinners. I woke before sunrise, brewed a single cup, and sat at the kitchen table that had hosted last night's war. The gold-rimmed plates were still stacked by the sink, one cracked, one untouched, a perfect summary of what remained. At 9:30 a.m., I walked into Attorney Lila Green's office, carrying the fireproof box like it was a newborn. The receptionist greeted me with that mix of curiosity and sympathy people use when they suspect your family's come apart. Lila was waiting by her desk, sleeves rolled up, a mug of black tea in one hand. "Morning, Mr. Keene. How'd the dinner go?" I set the box down, opened it slowly. Louder than I planned, quieter than I deserved. She went through the contents with surgical focus: Ben's affidavit, Gerard's photos, the notice of consent, Nora's text forwarding Jason's message from the night before, delete our chat. "He's overreacting," Lila smiled without showing her teeth. "Perfect. We'll use that." By 10:45 a.m., we filed the paperwork. A petition for a temporary restraining order on all marital asset movements, citing suspicious financial activity and emotional coercion. The court clerk stamped it with the kind of dispassionate thud that says justice doesn't care about timing, only documentation. That sound felt better than any Christmas hymn. When I returned home, Elaine was sitting in the den, a blanket around her shoulders, eyes red. The fireplace crackled weakly. I stood in the doorway and said, "We need to talk." She didn't look up. "You already said everything at the table." "No," I said. That was the truth. "This is the decision." I sat across from her, hands flat on my knees. "You have two lawful options: counseling with a financial consent agreement or separation with a property settlement that protects this house. Either way, you don't touch a single signature without me again." She started crying, quietly at first. "You were always married to your money, Marty." I shook my head. "No, I was married to my work, and so we could have this roof. You just forgot what it cost." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the low hiss of the gas logs and the hum of the refrigerator, that same household heartbeat I'd nearly lost. That evening, Nora texted me a screenshot. "Jason, delete our chat. He's overreacting." "Nora, he's not. You lied to both of us." She didn't delete anything. She forwarded it to Lila. That one gesture, that simple refusal to hide the truth, restored something I didn't know I'd lost: belief in my daughter's integrity. On December 30th, Jason's Home Flip LLC received a formal letter from Lila's office. Notice of potential tortious interference in marital property, demand for preservation of communications, and warning of pending civil action. The words were cold, precise, surgical. They cut better than any revenge could. 2 days later, Ben confirmed in writing that Jason's attempt to secure a $68,400 bridge loan against our address was flagged and logged permanently. By New Year's Eve, the fireproof box was heavier, but I slept lighter. Justice didn't come in fireworks or apologies. It came in letterhead, stamped seals, and balance sheets that matched again. That night, Elaine approached me quietly. "You've won," she whispered. I looked up from my ledger. "No, Elaine, I just stopped losing." She left the room without another word. At midnight, I poured myself a small glass of scotch and stepped outside. The neighborhood was still. A few sparklers hissed somewhere down the street. The air smelled of smoke and relief. In the distance, I heard church bells ring the new year. I raised the glass slightly, to no one in particular. "To proof," I murmured. "To paper. To peace." Justice wasn't about punishing them. It was about remembering who I was before they forgot. Every receipt, every signature, every affidavit. They weren't weapons. They were boundaries. And boundaries, I'd learned, are the most righteous revenge of all. New Year's Day, 2025. Quiet, grey, and clean. The kind of still morning where even the wind sounds like it's thinking. I brewed 1 cup of coffee and sat in the front room, letting the pale light spill across the carpet like forgiveness. The house was mine again, not just legally but spiritually. Every corner felt honest. I pulled out my notebook, the one that started as a ledger and had turned into something closer to a journal. On the first page, I had written proof, not panic. Below it, the story of every betrayal, every receipt, every affidavit. I went through it line by line, not as a victim anymore, but as an auditor making peace with the numbers. Money intact. Pension deposits safe. Attempted transfers all blocked. House secured by the notice of consent. No lien, no appraisal pending. Locks replaced December 2nd. No duplicate keys made. Garage keypad, code rotated December 28th. Allies accounted for. Ben, Lila, Nora. Each of them a line in the balance sheet of my salvation. Elaine had moved in with her sister for a few weeks. The silence her absence left behind was heavy, but not hostile. For the first time in months, I could hear the clock tick without feeling accused by it. I took that as progress. Around noon, I went out to the garage. The place smelled like oil and sawdust. The scent of my past life, when a full day's labor made sense and loyalty meant something. I opened the tool chest and began to clean each wrench, each screwdriver, arranging them from smallest to largest. My father used to say, "If your tools are in order, your mind will follow." He was right. When I finished, I placed the fireproof box on the bench. Its weight had changed. Not heavier, not lighter, just settled. Inside it, the documents weren't evidence anymore. They were closure. I taped a note to the lid that read, "For Nora, keep the house, but never let anyone sign for you." Then I opened a blank page in my notebook and began writing a letter to her. "When I'm gone, this home is yours. But it's protected by conditions. No loans against it. No co-signatures. If you ever marry again, remember that transparency is cheaper than repair." I ended the letter with a quote. My old union steward used to say, "Fair isn't when you win. Fair is when nobody cheats." That one line had carried me through the darkest moments. Justice isn't about triumph, it's about equilibrium. As the day went on, sunlight crept across the wall, catching the photo of me and Elaine on our wedding day. I stared at it longer than I wanted to. There was still love in that frame, somewhere beneath the dust of time and betrayal. Maybe that's the cruelest part. You don't stop loving someone just because they tried to erase you from the paperwork. Love, like ink, leaves a shadow even when you scrub it clean. I spent the evening cooking for myself. Something simple, roast potatoes and chicken thighs. When the oven timer dinged, I smiled. That sound used to make my blood boil. Now it felt like punctuation, a period, not an alarm. The dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a statement. Life continues, and I still know how to feed it. After dinner, I turned on the radio, old blues humming low, and sat by the window watching the snow start to fall again. The neighborhood was calm. Mrs. Patel's porch light glowed softly next door, a little beacon in the quiet street. Somewhere a dog barked once and stopped. Everything held still. For the first time since November, I didn't feel the need to double-check my bank account, my locks, or my conscience. I had learned something no courtroom could teach. Sometimes revenge isn't burning bridges, it's quietly owning the road. I finished the night by writing one last line in my ledger. In thick, deliberate ink, peace restored. Property secure, dignity intact. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and let the house rest, exactly as it was meant to. January 10th, 2025, 2 weeks since the Christmas Eve reckoning. And the air still felt different inside the house, lighter, the kind of light that comes after a thunderstorm. Cautious, clean and full of echoes. Elaine and I sat in Attorney Lila Green's office again. The radiator hummed, the faint smell of paper and peppermint tea lingering like old advice. She slid a post-nuptial agreement across the polished oak table. No sale or refinance without both signatures, she explained calmly. A 30-day cooling period for any financial decision over $500. All consulting or investment discussions involving marital assets must be disclosed. In writing. Elaine's eyes traced the paper like it was written in a language she used to know. "Sign," I said quietly. No anger left in my tone, just arithmetic. She hesitated, then pressed her pen to the page. The scratch of ink was the sound of finality. I added my signature below hers, straight and unshaken. Lila smiled faintly. That's peace, not punishment. We agreed to attend counseling, or failing that, pursue a respectful separation through her colleague. For the first time in months, the air between Elaine and me wasn't thick with lies. It was just air, thin, breathable, real. On January 14th, Jason sent me a text message that began with misunderstanding and ended with, I was only trying to help. 3 paragraphs of nothing. I replied with a single line, the house is not your line of credit. 2 days later, Nora called. Dad, Jason's paused his flip project, she said softly. He says he needs to rethink his finances. Good, I told her. Pausing saves bridges. Burning them costs more. She didn't say anything, but I could hear the relief in her breathing. The kind of silence where love returns without needing to announce itself. The following week, I was out shoveling Mrs. Patel's front steps when she called from her doorway, You look lighter, Mr. Keene. I laughed for the first time in months. Paperwork's heavy until it's filed, I said, leaning on the shovel handle. She grinned and waved me off like an old aunt who knew everything but wouldn't say it. That evening I returned home, dusted off the fireproof box, and placed it on the closet's top shelf. You've earned your rest, I muttered. For 2 months it had been the vault that held my sanity. Now it was just a quiet box full of proof. A history lesson, not a weapon. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to sleep with it under my bed. A few days later, I stood at the whiteboard in the trade school where I'd once volunteered before all this madness began. The classroom was filled with kids, 19, 20, maybe 21, all with rough hands and hopeful eyes. They wanted to learn how to balance a life built on labor. I picked up the marker and wrote 2 sentences in thick blue letters. Paper is a tool. Use it. Silence at the table is a sound you listen to. I turned and looked at them. You're going to work hard. You're going to trust people who don't deserve it. But if you keep your receipts, your honesty, and your patience, you'll survive every storm they throw at you. They nodded, some writing it down, others just staring, like maybe they'd already learned that truth the hard way. That night, back home, I cooked myself dinner again, roast beef this time. The oven timer dinged, and instead of dread, I heard gratitude. That sound had changed meanings twice now, from betrayal to boundary to calm. I plated my food, poured a glass of water, and ate at the same table that had once witnessed a family unravel. Now it was just me, and it was enough. Elaine still texted occasionally, short messages about Nora or small household details. No apologies, no defenses. Just neutral ground, and maybe that was all we could manage. Some marriages don't end. They simply settle into an honest distance. Before bed, I wrote one final note in my journal, trust rebuilt, not renewed. Boundaries drawn, not barbed. Justice done quietly. Then I turned off the lamp, leaned back in my chair, and whispered into the darkness, the storm's over. I kept the roof. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of locks, ledgers, or lies. February 2, 2025, Groundhog Day. I stepped outside to grab the morning mail. And for once, I didn't brace myself for bad news. The snow was thin, melting at the edges, and the sky had the soft blue tint of a truce. I pulled open the mailbox and saw an envelope addressed in neat, unfamiliar handwriting to Mrs. Elaine Keene. The sender's logo read Seaside Condominiums, Clearwater. FLI brought it inside, poured myself coffee, and slit it open with the old letter opener my father gave me. The note was short and almost polite. We're sorry to lose your reservation for December 29th. Please contact us if you wish to reschedule. I set it on the counter beside her favorite mug. No note, no comment. Just a piece of paper that quietly confessed everything she'd refused to say. That was Justice's sense of humor. It doesn't yell, it just forwards your mail. I wandered through the living room, stopping by the photo wall. Among the frames was one from 1991, me and Elaine, in front of this very house, paint on our arms, both grinning like we'd just built something that would last forever. I took the photo out of its frame and taped it to the inside of the kitchen cabinet door where I keep the mugs. A reminder that legacies don't always end with signatures. Some just evolve. At noon, Nora called. "Dad," she said, "Jason wants to meet you. Says it's important." I could hear hesitation in her voice, not fear, just fatigue. "Where?" I asked. "The VFW hall on Carson Street," she said. He said, "Man to man." I chuckled softly. "Tell him I'll bring the man part. He can bring the truth. The VFW hall hadn't changed in 30 years. Same cracked tiles, same smell of burnt coffee and polish. The walls were covered with old service photos, men who'd fought their wars and come home with fewer illusions. Fitting place for ours to end. Jason was already there, suit jacket too tight, face pale but trying for charm. "Mr. Keene," he said, standing awkwardly. "Jason," I nodded, sitting opposite him. The table between us was scarred and honest, like everything else in this building. He started with buzzwords, of course. "I want to clear the air." There were miscommunications. I cut him off, leaning forward just enough for him to smell the coffee on my breath. "Stop with the buzzwords. Give me nouns, dates, amounts, names." He blinked, throat bobbing. I pulled a small folder from my coat pocket and laid it flat on the table. Lila's letter, the one that demanded preservation of communications and warned of pending action, slid out like a calm threat. "Before you say anything stupid," I said, "read this." He skimmed it, color draining from his face with every line. This is serious," I nodded. "Exactly. You play with other people's assets, Jason, and you learn how sharp paper can be." He exhaled shakily. "What do you want me to do?" "Start with an apology," I said. "To Nora, for dragging her into greed she didn't sign up for. Then to me, for trying to turn my pension into your seed money. And after that, apologize to the idea of honest work, because you've forgotten what it looks like." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right," he whispered. It wasn't much, but it was real. And for men like him, real is rare. When I left the hall, the winter light hit the parking lot just right, making the snow sparkle like new steel. Across the street stood a foreclosed house, shutters hanging loose, a bank-owned sign leaning crooked in the yard. I stopped for a moment, staring at it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Somewhere another man had trusted the wrong person with his signature. Somewhere another Jason had convinced someone it was just liquidity. But I still had my keys, my title, my peace, because I learned in time that lines on paper decide who keeps the door. Driving home, I turned off the radio and let the silence hum. The house came into view, my house, porch light glowing, steady as a promise. I parked, stepped out, and felt the cold air bite my cheeks. Inside, I poured another cup of coffee, looked at the old photo taped inside the cabinet, and smiled. We'd both aged, both cracked a little, but the foundation was still holding. My final thought came easy, the way truth does when it's earned. Revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like closing a door gently and locking it, not slamming it. "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." And I walked back to myself. Then I turned off the light, locked the door, and let the quiet have the last word.